from the Young Turks, Cenk Uygur, John Iadarola with you guys on an interesting Tuesday evening throughout the country. So on today's program, we're gonna do a lot of things. One of them is, John, everybody's been asking, the right wing has, hey, can you guys talk about John Durham and his amazing findings about how the Hillary Clinton infiltrated the Trump White House? Well, ask and ye shall receive. We shall expose every one of their lies. None of it is true, as usual. And what drives me crazy, and we'll talk more about it later, is a lot of those liars are in the White House press corps. They just sit there, lie after lie after lie, and the idiot Democrats are like, oh, they're super legitimate. You know, CNN regularly hires from right-wing media outlets. It's insane.
Recently.
It's insane. Caitlin Collins, the White House correspondent, esteemed Caitlin Collins, is from the Daily Caller, who massively lied about this.
Yeah.
It's just insane. And meanwhile, progressive outlets can't even get in a Democratic White House. It's insane.
And it's not true. And every one of those right wingers was totally fine with mass surveillance on every American for like 20 years.
Yeah.
Until they didn't hit Trump.
All right, so we'll give you the details of that story a little bit later. And now some conservatives, or one in particular, is attacking witches, okay? And now it sounds funny, but it isn't. You'll see that later in the program. All right.
It's just viral marketing for multiverse of madness.
Yes.
Anyway, with that said, let's jump into some other news. Donald Trump's accountants apparently booted him at some point in the last week. That is Mazars USA. They've been the accounting firm that the Trump organization has used for many years. They've apparently parted ways with Trump. They ended their relationship at some point, calling into question, like very specifically, not by implication, they are calling into question the trustworthiness of a decade's worth of financial statements that had been prepared by Mazars USA for the Trump organization. This was revealed in court documents filed Monday as part of an investigation by the Attorney General of New York into the Trump organization's business practices. That's been an ongoing investigation. This is just the latest development. So Mazars sent a letter to the Trump organization. This is dated February 9th, so very recent, saying that annual financial statements it prepared for Trump between 2011 and 2020 should no longer be relied upon. And in part, they say, while we have not concluded that the various financial statements as a whole contain material discrepancies, based upon the totality of the circumstances, we believe our advice to you to no longer rely upon those financial statements is appropriate. So there is a lot of like weasel language and vague language here, which we can definitely speculate upon. But they are cutting ties, and they've been working with the Trump organization for a long time. And this is not like, Cenk or I getting a new tax prep person. An accounting firm that works with an organization as big as the Trump organization, that is a huge thing, a very valuable contract for them to have. So there's gotta be a good reason why they don't wanna be involved with them anymore. And while going out the door, not just saying goodbye, but saying, oh, basically all that work we did for you, yeah, we're not necessarily gonna stand by that.
Yeah, so this is actually very large news, and for the first time leads to a tiny percentage hope that Donald Trump might actually be prosecuted and go to jail. Okay, hold. I'll give you the percentages, in my opinion, in a second. But first, let's give more context. So there are three layers of potential financial crimes that Donald Trump did. One is the one that he already got, that the proceedings have begun on, and his chief financial officer has been indicted on, which is, it depends on your way of looking at it, but I would call it honestly low-level criminality, right? Hey, they gave an apartment to the CFO's son, and they should have paid taxes on it, but they didn't, and they didn't report it, etc. Is it illegal? Yes. If you got caught on it, would you suffer consequences? Very, very likely, okay? Then there is larger level financial crimes, which is regularly reporting something on IRS forms and then reporting completely different values for your properties when you're getting a loan. So you want the properties to be valued high when you're getting a loan because you're gonna borrow off of them. You want it to be valued low when you're submitting it to the IRS because you wanna pay less tax on it. That is not at all kosher. And when Trump says, oh, it's a genius business move to go bankrupt. That's why I went bankrupt. You stiffed the people who trusted you and gave you money. And then that way you don't have to pay them back. And I know right wingers actually believe that. No, it is not savvy business to go bankrupt. I have to explain these simple concepts, right? And no, lying to the IRS is not a simple matter, or lying to, by the way, creditors. That is significant criminal activity.
Well, specifically, what you're talking about there is there was a bit of a viral moment. That's basically the sort of crime that Representative Ocasio-Cortez was talking with Mike Cohen about.
Yes,
during his testimony.
Yes, and Michael Cohen's come on TYT as well and talked about it here as well. And so, this Mazars revelation is related to that level of crime, because they did the accounting for Donald Trump where he was playing with all the different numbers and making up wildly different numbers for the same properties. Now, I don't know what happened at Mazars, but very likely what happened was they got their hand caught in the cookie jar. They didn't know for a decade that Trump was playing with the property values. Have you ever met Donald Trump? They met Donald Trump and they trusted his numbers? Well, no, but that's not their job. Their job is not to trust the numbers. Their job is to validate the numbers. Yeah. So I think Mazars is in a lot of legal trouble. And not I know, because you don't do this to a client, because every other client's gonna go, hey, are they gonna do it to me? That is a very significant problem for their firm. You don't do that to a client, especially one as high profile as Donald Trump, unless you did something terribly illegal and you're trying to get the hell out of the building. And you're now cooperating with prosecutors and saying, it wasn't me. It wasn't me. Oh my God, I had no idea what his property values were.
Yeah.
Who could figure out what property values are? What am I, an accounting firm? Actually, you are. So them putting that letter out means they pulled a chute. They're gone. They're trying to avoid criminal responsibility themselves. And Trump, if he was a regular person, would be in massive trouble.
Yeah.
That's not a little illegal. That's a lot illegal. And that'll get you a lot of time in jail or in prison, okay? I haven't gotten to the third layer yet.
Sure, not directly in prison yet, because the investigation that the New York AG Tish James is engaged in can't directly result in criminal charges, just civil, like financial charges, but it could lead into something else. That is
so, yeah, let's be clear about that. So the civil charges have been laid out, but they are also working on a criminal case in conjunction with the Manhattan DA.
Yes,
they have not announced any indictments yet. That is why right now Eric Trump and Donald Jr. and Ivanka are nervously tweeting. Okay, oh, the real problem is Mazars. Yeah, oh yeah, oh yeah. We'll reveal. Oh, the real problem is the prosecutors. The prosecutors are the problem.
Well, I think that for a decade, the Trump family was giving accurate information, humble information, let's be real, to Mazars, and then Mazars was lying about it and cheating.
Oh,
I think that's probably what was happening.
Because Mazars thought, you know what, I just want to help Donald Trump, even though he didn't ask for it. Okay, by putting myself in legal jeopardy.
Or maybe not even help him. Maybe, like many, they were taking advantage of humble, trusting Donald Trump.
Poor Donald Trump.
But anyway, look, I think you are right that there is a possibility of consequences, financial, if not criminal. In this case, more than in past ones, because there are already investigations ongoing. This is not a thing where we just have to hope that after 5 years, Mueller will actually move a little bit or something. That said, there have been a lot of stories that we've sat at this desk and covered that looked really, really bad for them, and he's still, walking around golfing and interrupting people's dinners. So
yeah. So now, John's right that so far it's civil. They are doing the criminal investigation. They have not announced anything about that yet. So I'm going to put out a percentage, which is fun. I now think Donald Trump has a 2% chance of being convicted. Now, why do I say 2%? It should be based on these facts. If you put a random person there that had no political connections at all, I'd say the chance of conviction is about 80%, okay? When the full weight of the government comes down on you, and New York Attorney General and the Manhattan DA's office is looking into you, you're in a world of trouble, okay? So they don't do those investigations, they don't risk their careers for fun, right? They only do it if they're absolutely positively sure. Doesn't mean they get everything right, but especially in a high profile case like this, they're usually honestly scared, right? So to me, the civil actions, I don't care about bankrupting Donald Trump. I care about the criminal actions, okay? So, because if he's, I don't know, I mean, Republicans might make him president from jail, who knows, right? I mean, they love him no matter what. They're like, oh, he's a proven criminal and he stole my money through taxes? Oh, I love him even more, he's so savvy, right? I wouldn't put it past them, right? But I think it'll make a difference overall if he's put up on criminal charges, and especially if he's convicted. But it requires courage to simply do your job. And here, the way that they have laid it out in the civil cases is so overwhelming. They're gonna be hard pressed not to file criminal charges because it's clearly a crime.
Yeah, the only fear I would say is that, look, you're saying the fact that he would be in prison, that might get through. It might also be jujitsu'd into, he's a bigger martyr now.
Yeah, of course.
They finally locked him up, maybe. And I disagree a little bit. Like, I love the idea of them bankrupting, but I also think it's impossible. Like, if he actually lost whatever money he has now, he'd release an NFT of his hair or something, and there would be credulous Trump supporters that would give him $1 million. So it's probably impossible. That said, I want to get your reaction to one more. Again, a paragraph with a whole bunch of sort of vague language that we could interpret into. So they say, Mazars said that it concluded that the statements were no longer reliable based on a couple different things, and I find all of these interesting. So one is based in part on the Attorney General's earlier filings, its own investigations, and information the accountants received from internal and external sources. So the Attorney General's earlier filings imply that the Attorney General had some sort of information that so directly contradicted things that had gone into the financial statements they'd worked on that they could no longer stand by them. Their own investigations, which by the way, they do not come out and say anything specific based on that. They say, we haven't identified any material discrepancies, except in your investigations, you found something that made you worried about your own thing. So what does that even mean? And then internal and external sources, presumably other than the AG's team. So internal sources means, what do they have? Someone who's cooperating with the AG? Is there someone who's leaking information? Somebody who testified that the valuations were wrong?
No, the external sources could be as simple as, well, Donald Trump said that his Trump Tower was worth $2 when filing his IRS forms, and we believed him. But we looked it up online on Zillow and found out that it's actually worth a lot more than that. And so,
$10.
and then we looked at our internal sources. And, oh yeah, it's not worth $2 because we filed another form that said that it was worth $2 billion.
So, so you think internal to Mazars, not internal to the Trump organization, not an internal source who knows that they've been cooking the books and is participating in the AG's investigation?
My interpretation of that was internal to Mazars. Okay. And by the way, one of the COO's son looks like he's cooperating. COO of Trump. Org, okay, not Mazars. So the prosecutors seem to have an inside person, at least at that level, cooperating. He apparently got a house also without paying taxes, etc. So that's how they got him, and they flip him, etc. Guys, the minute you see Alan Weisselberg has flipped, he hasn't flipped yet. He's the chief financial officer. He's the one that kept all the books for Trump. If he flips, then Trump is actually in trouble. Okay, now that hasn't happened yet, so I don't even know if the DAs are gonna gather up the courage to prosecute on something that is super straightforward and now is totally in the public record, and Trump's accounting office has said, oh yeah, we're totally lying. Okay, he was lying, we were lying, everybody was lying. Okay, I'm sorry, we made mistakes according to internal and external sources. Okay, according to everybody. Okay, so last thing is, the third layer of financial crimes would be the most devastating, but right now there's not nearly enough information on it. So that's my theories. I'm not the only one that has these theories, but I'm clarifying for you guys that is not part of this story. Is the money laundering that Donald Trump might have done for the Russians and the connections that he had to Russian oligarchs through Deutsche Bank. That stuff has been investigated in the past, and that would be a completely different layer of financial crimes because it would connect him to a foreign government and have his financial interests tied to that. Now, I have speculated about that on the show because of information and evidence that is out in the public, right? So his two dumbass sons going, we got all our money from the Russians. right? Like, oh, nobody would lend him any more money after the 6 bankruptcies. And the Sons get asked on 2 different occasions about that. And they go, oh yeah, there was no problem. The idiot Eric Trump was like, oh, it turns out the Russians love golf. That's why they give us so much money for the golf courses. Okay, now there's other evidence that's in public. That's not the only thing. But right now, there's no information about that. By the way, one of the reasons I love this story is because if all of the information actually becomes public, maybe we'll get to find out, did he do it or did he not do it in regards to Russians and the oligarchs and the Deutsche Bank? Because it might turn out that he didn't. And then I'll come out and say, oh, it turns out I was worried about that, but they really did an analysis of it. And it turns out he wasn't doing money laundering. I'll tell you that right away if that's what the information reveals, right? But so far, the jury is not even in so that it can't even go out on that yet. So we don't know yet about that. But the second layer is plenty good enough to convict any regular person. Now we're gonna see how much political clout Trump has to avoid these actual criminal charges.
He's rich, so probably a lot.
He's rich, he has 40% of the country that will believe anything he says. So that's a lot of power. And now it's gonna do battle with the law.
Yeah.
Okay. We got to take a quick break, guys. When we come back, we've got so much more for you guys, including the right-wing media outlets' lies, as we told you, and then an outrageous case where it turns out police departments are using evidence collected from rape victims against the victims.
Jesus.
Unbelievable. All right, that and a lot more when we come back. All right, back on TYT, Cenk and John with you guys. News.
Okay, news coming at you. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau took a rare step in the Canadian context, not seen in a number of decades, of declaring a national public order emergency in an attempt to shut down the protests that have been going on in Canada for some time. This Emergencies Act invocation can provide for the use of the military, but may not necessarily lead to that. And Trudeau said the government is not bringing them in, but it can temporarily suspend citizens' rights to free movement or assembly, and the government is taking steps to stop financial support of illegal protests. That part it's been doing for some time. The Emergencies Act invocation is new, and they're making claims about how far they'll go with that and no further. We'll have to see in a week or two where that's at. Bear in mind, a few things have also happened recently. The decision to invoke the law came as the Royal Canadian Mounted Police in Alberta said on Monday that they had arrested 13 people and seized items including guns, body armor, and ammunition. You can see actually a shot of some of what was seized. You know, I am assuming that that is in the Canadian context, a large arsenal. It's one family's worth of guns here in the US, but quite a bit over there. And Trudeau is saying that the government is not overriding the Charter of Rights and Freedoms in Canada, nor limiting the right to peaceful assembly, saying we are not preventing people from exercising their right to protest legally. Of course, he's putting a lot of spin on legally there. A lot of the weight of that sentence there is on legally. Also, the chief of police has resigned in Ottawa. That was actually just earlier today. So a lot's been going on there.
Yeah, so before we get to the right-wing overreaction to this, I think this is a tough issue, and we've talked about it in this context. So normally this kind of stuff is used against left-wing protesters, and they don't wait a couple of weeks. If it's a left-wing protesters, they're gonna go in first day. Then I don't know about calling an emergency, a nationwide emergency, but they usually act without doing that. And I'm being a little unfair to Canada because I don't really know how they deal with it other than a couple of stories I've read about how they've dealt with indigenous tribes, right? But here in America, you're a left-wing protest. They're gonna remove you. They don't need no special act, nothing, okay? And they'll beat you over the head and then put you in prison. I mean, we've covered all these stories. But if you're a right-winger anywhere on the continent, apparently, you get kid gloves, right? Like, oh, yeah, you're okay, okay, well, let's be really careful, they're right wing, okay? So, but on the other hand, I believe in the right to protest, and I believe sometimes you do have to block a road. So I've said from day one, look, I kind of like what the truckers are doing until they weirdly turn on the local population, right? So I don't like the the swastikas and the Confederate flags. But you know what? You can't put that on every one of the truckers there. It's the individuals that have those particular flags. The nonstop honking and the harassing the locals is a weird turn. And so that's gonna be the focus of whether Trudeau's doing the right thing or not. But I would normally exercise a lot of caution, and not just normally, but also in this case, in going after protesters. So now the question is, are they breaking some laws where you would say, okay, enough is enough, right? So they've been there a long time, and apparently they've had a ton of standoffs with the locals. They even negotiated a deal about when to honk their horns because they were keeping everybody up at night, etc. But even inconveniencing people, that is partly the point of a protest, right?
Yeah, we're in that weird position where, because we're on the left and the right believes absolutely insane things about the left, we are always told what we're advocating for, even when it's not. We did not ask for the truckers to get cleared out 2 hours into their protest. In the same way that when we were adding context to the Joe Rogan thing, I never called for his show to be canceled. Like, we're always told that the extreme thing we want is unacceptable when we're not actually pushing for it. But I do think that we should have a conversation about it. I agree with Cenk. I think that protests can and often should be inconvenient, but it's a lot like a filibuster. You're doing all of this. It provides an opportunity for you to persuade, but there's also a risk to it. If you are moving in a trucker convoy, that draws attention to the issues that you want to push, and that's the way that potentially you persuade people. Or maybe people don't like your issue and they turn against you. And in this case, look, we know that the vast majority of Canadians and even truckers don't actually agree with them. Now, you do not have to have a lot of popular support for your protest to be legitimate. You can be incredibly unpopular. So they're free to do that. The question then is, and this is an honest question I would ask to good faith conservatives. So what is the limit then? I don't believe it's on me, especially in the Canadian context, to say you get to block the streets of Ottawa for 3 days or 8 days. When people don't seem to be buying it, they're not getting onto your side. So then how long? Is it forever? Can they just, there's no more streets in Ottawa, like forever? Is that actually what you want? Like, there has to be bounds of reason at some point. And so can we have an actual conversation about that at some point?
Right, and part of the point of protest, left wing or right wing, is to draw attention to an issue. And so for example, in Selma, Alabama, when they were doing the march in the civil rights era, obviously the cops did a cavalry charge on them on horses, but they also sicked dogs on them. And some of the most powerful pictures were of civil rights protesters being mauled by dogs. And so once they got attention to the issue, the whole country realized, oh my God, they still don't have basic rights in the South for African Americans, not basic rights. And then the country said, that's not good, we don't want that. And Lyndon Johnson, pushed very aggressively by Martin Luther King, Malcolm X, and the others, passed the Civil Rights Act and the Voting Rights Act, which required big majorities to do that because they had to get past the filibuster, okay? And so now when the right wing draws attention, and they've done the trucker convoy in terms of the original point of the protest to draw attention to your cause, has done a spectacular job. Everybody's heard of it. And so their cause is, don't believe 99% of the world's doctors. All the doctors are morons, and we right-wing truckers, is specific, not all truckers, okay, have got this figured out, and the truckers know better than the doctors. Congratulations, you've made your case, okay? Now, how long are you going to continue to make your case, which the great majority of Canadians find to be mental? Okay, so.
Is it a week? Is it a month?
I don't know, those are good questions, right? Those are good questions, because I wanna allow protests as much as possible, but at some point, I don't know what the time period is after you're still blocking the roads, which is, yes, technically illegal, right? And there's a lot of things that happen that are technically illegal in a protest, right? But I would account for and say it's okay, including right-wing protests, right?
Yeah.
But there are some things you can't do. So like, for example, when the Bundy guys took over a Federal Reserve, not a Federal Reserve, that would be a different act. And then trust me, that then all of a sudden the government would care, right?
That's true.
But when they took over that federal land in Oregon, well, that's not a normal you can't come in with guns and take over like land and say it's now mine. right? So there's different levels of criminality, et cetera. So that's an interesting conversation. But of course, right-wing media is not having an interesting conversation.
Well, and the difficult thing is that, like, I was trying to ask an honest question, but we can't, for the vast majority of these things, we can't have an honest, open conversation about this because most of the people involved in this are operating in entirely bad faith. Like, if you are just a trucker who wants people to be aware of the mandate thing, then you might have a certain limit for how long you think it makes sense to do your protest. If, on the other hand, you're an American right-wing news network that would desperately like all of the time between now and the 2022 congressional elections and possibly the 2024 presidential election to just be a vague, amorphous, never-ending Tea Party-esque trucker protest, then you don't care about persuading people on the mandates or anything like that. You just want there to be stuff so that you don't have to talk about specific policies, just a thing where truckers are there or whatever. And fundamentally, if we're talking about good faith, what does the right actually think about this? I want to have a conversation about how much allowance for protest. We err on the side of a lot of allowance for protest, including inconvenient protest. They're pretending that they want to do that right now, but clearly they don't. What were they just advocating for Occupy Wall Street? This is the right of the people to do this, or the autonomous zone in the Pacific Northwest? They were advocating for you to be able to run down and kill protesters and get off scot-free. They don't actually support any of this, except if it's convenient and they agree with the protesters in a very limited context. So we can't talk about actual principles when they don't have any actual principles that they're bringing to bear on this issue.
Absolutely. Before we go to the Tucker clip, I want to go to our members because a couple of really good points. Cousin Vinny wrote in, remind me where Tucker was when Trump had Black Lives Matter protesters abducted and thrown into unmarked vans without giving cause or reason for arrest. So we're principled, and even in a right-wing protest, we tell you, hey, we got to figure out a way to let them protest for quite some time, right?
Yeah.
Those guys are like, oh, they're kidnapping people off the streets? Who cares? Oh, they're black or they're left-wingers? Good. Yeah, police state is awesome.
Yep.
So they're just goddamn liars, and they're the world's biggest hypocrites. Totally true. Pseudo Dragon lives in Ottawa, and he said, "Jake, I live in Ottawa. This is far more than inconvenient. It is hateful. It is violent, and it has been since day one. Please read some of the local news coverage before talking about this again." No, brother, I have read it, and by the way, that's probably why the Ottawa police chief resigned. Because if they're breaking other laws, like, hey, I'm doing the boycott. Oh, but hey, you're a random citizen of Ottawa. I don't like you. I'm going to assault you. Well, that guy should be arrested on the spot. That's not a part of a protest at all. If they break any of the laws that outside of blocking the streets, et cetera, that's part of their protest, of course they should be arrested. And a lot of them should have already been arrested for those specific crimes that they were committing. But thank you for writing in. I love doing the show with our members, and you guys often provide excellent perspective, which you do from Ottawa. So tyt.com/join to become a member and do the show with us. Now, yes. Tucker.
Okay, with that, Tucker Carlson not happy at all with the move by the Canadian government to declare an emergency when it comes to the protests in Ottawa. Here is what he had to say about it.
When thousands of blue-collar workers showed up in Ottawa several weeks ago to protest the tyranny being imposed against them, the Prime Minister of Canada refused to meet with them or to speak to them. Instead, he fled the city. And then from his bunker, he called the truckers Nazis. When they still didn't leave the city, Justin Trudeau suspended democracy and declared Canada a dictatorship. The Emergencies Act is martial law. It has never been invoked in the history of that country. Now, by law, the Emergencies Act is allowed only in emergencies, in quote, urgent and critical situations that seriously endanger the lives, health, or safety of Canadians. What's happening now does not qualify. What's happening in Canada now is not an emergency. So is it an overstatement to compare what is happening in Canada right now to what happens in a Stalinist dictatorship? Well, the slogans are different. In the Eastern Bloc, they used to talk about solidarity. In Canada, they talk about diversity. But the repression is similar.
Okay, he's like contractually not able to do a segment without mocking diversity for some weird reason. Yes, it is the exact same repression as in Stalinism. It's the same camps and the same, just pits of bodies. It's the same, really. It is tyrannical. It's a dictatorship because they want them to get shots. that they're providing free of charge. Again, it's
by the way, save
lives. The entire thing obviously is ridiculous. We're going to talk about this. I just want to remind you of a few things. Again, bearing in mind that these people do not even have a vague memory of how to operate in good faith. So Tucker Carlson, who believes eventually stopping the protest is the same exact thing as Stalinism. He is the guy, by the way, who said of Black Lives Matter protesters just a couple of years ago that they should be labeled domestic terrorists, arrested, and paraded in front of cameras like MS-13. They should be frog marched in front of cameras. They should be plucked off of the streets. Tom Cotton literally said, send in the troops. So again, the right, not in favor of this emergency order, but when Trump was talking about sending his goon squad and they were black bagging people and throwing them in the back of like Kia minivans and everything, all of them were totally fine with this when they were buzzing protesters with helicopters and bashing people out of the peaceful guitar playing protesters that had assembled outside of the White House. That was perfectly acceptable. This is obviously insane and unacceptable. Yeah. It's just not honest. So how do we have a serious conversation about this?
So look, now when someone comes out as a Republican, as recently an NBC sports reporter retired and said she was going to go into Republican politics, I now think they're insane and racist. Oh, you can't say that. What are you talking about? Look, there's Tucker Carlson. They're all fans of Trump and Tucker Carlson and Tom Cotton and all these guys, right? So Tucker Carlson says if it's good, upstanding white right-wingers that are truckers, then they're patriots and heroes, and it's Stalinists to try to save their lives. Stalin killed about 25 million people. He didn't save anybody's life, okay? So, but if it's Black Lives Matter protesters, like I said, arrest them, they're terrorists, treat them with the full force of the law. Gee, I wonder what the difference is. I wonder what the difference is. Come on, guys. You know why they do it? Because they're racist. Yes, oh no, I'm gonna call them racist, cry. Shut up and actually understand logic and reasoning. I know right wing hates logic, they despise it, right? Mm-hmm. And it's because they got to be racist under any and all circumstances, and logic bothers them. They're like, oh God damn it, if we use logic, we can't actually be racist.
Yeah.
So, and left wing, right wing, like they're gonna care to do principled stands like we are? Like we often do, and oftentimes say, oh no, you should let the right wingers do that. They've never done a principled stand in their life. I've never once seen them say, oh yeah, you know what, the left wing has a good point there. Mm-hmm. Or you know what, hey, the left wing's saying the same thing we were, maybe they should be protected too. No, the minute there's any opportunity, crush them. But look, Standing Rock, so the Tucker Carlson said, I can't believe Trudeau didn't even meet with them. Did anybody meet with the folks in Standing Rock? Nobody in the government met with them. Okay, now, mind you, by the way, that was under Barack Obama.
Yeah.
Even corporate Democrats like Obama wouldn't deign to meet with left-wing protesters. Never, left-wing protesters. I don't know that Obama ever met with a single one in 8 years.
And what would Fox have said if he did?
Yeah, they're all catering to the left-wing terrorists, et cetera, right? And then Trump and DeSantis and all their heroes, laws are being passed left and right, including in Florida. Number one, if there's a left-wing protest, you're allowed to run them over, as John said. Those are literal laws where they say, hey, you won't be prosecuted if there's a protester in the streets or the highways, like the truckers, and you run them over and kill them, we will not prosecute you. Imagine if Trudeau said that. Imagine if Trudeau said, let's pass a law that if they're in the street, you can run them over and kill them and we won't prosecute you. I mean, he already called him a Stalinist. What would he call him then? Okay, so, and by the way, you want to protest Israel? That is illegal in many states, including Florida. Not any kind of protest, but if you do a BDS protest and you have a government contract, they're going to take that away from you. They're going to punish you. They don't believe in free speech at all. Yeah. Massive, unbelievable liars. And then finally, martial law. He said, oh my God, can you believe they're doing martial law? Michael Flynn, the former national security advisor for Donald Trump, went to the White House after the election and argued that Donald Trump should impose martial law in America and seize the ballot boxes and declare himself president, even though he lost. They had a 3-hour debate in the White House as to whether they should declare martial law and end our democracy. The only reason why Trump didn't agree to it is because the rest of the staff said they would all resign and they would not allow it. So credit to whatever, and horrible Trump loyalists that were there at the end that said, killing democracy seems just an inch too far, right? But Trump entertained it for 3 hours. You're talking about martial, you're now upset about martial law, Tucker Carlson? You're now upset about it. How many times did you cover that story on Fox News? 0.
Yeah.
Because you're a gigantic liar and you never care about any of the issues. Your whole idea is how can white people maintain their power no matter what? That's the prism through which Tucker Carlson and almost the entire right wing sees the world. Okay, we got to take another break. When we come back, more stories, and unfortunately, or depending on how some of you view it, fortunately, more anger. All right, back on TYT, Cenk and John with you guys. Forward.
Okay, forward. It's been kind of a rough period for Representative Henry Cuellar of Texas, a Democrat. He recently was once again challenged by Jessica Cisneros, very narrowly warded off her challenge last time, so he's got to be scared about that. He's been brought into this Azerbaijan money FBI investigation with his office and his home being raided. None of that looks good, but he does have some things on his side. A lot of people online seem to really like him, and they seem to have begun liking him very, very recently. There's been some great reporting at The Intercept that led us into a rabbit hole looking at the social media supporters for Henry Cuellar that seem to have just sprung up and are very excited to talk about the representative. So as an example, there's a young woman named Elia Isabella who opened a Twitter account just this month and began sharing her appreciation for Cuellar. She follows 64 people and has 6 followers, and nearly all of them share her breathless enthusiasm. As an example, this Monday, she tweeted, "A pride, all my support, and I hope he stays in the Congress," about Cuellar, so eager to post that she didn't have time to consider her unusual grammar. Her dedication to Cuellar is so complete that her entire online activity consists of retweeting Cuellar and replying positively to his posts. Selena Stefani, who has exclusively posted messages praising Henry Cuellar since she also began her account in January, tweeted, "Thanks for always caring, hopefully achieve great things for Texas." There's a lot of others, but I want to jump into some of the actual tweets because there's great reporting here on The Intercept. You should definitely go read it. I went and started looking at a lot of Henry Cuellar's tweets recently and at the replies, and then would go into those accounts, and there were some similarities, some patterns that definitely popped up. So Sasha Hill, massive fan of Cuellar, tweeting recently, "We can't have a better congressman than Henry Cuellar. Henry, you have very good proposals. Let's hope much longer. Your proposals are the best." She's really into his proposals. "Henry is certainly a man we need in Texas." All of her activity, I mean literally every single tweet that she has sent since she started her account in January has been to and about Henry Cuellar. And there are definitely some patterns here. She is not the only person who's very into his proposals. Danielle Butker tweeted, "Henry has the best proposals." She too joined Twitter in January of this year and has 7 followers. Johanna Bolton says, "Thank you, Henry. Your proposals are very good." She has 5 followers and also started her account in January 2022. In fact, if you go as I did, you will notice that there are only 2 times that the vast majority of his supporters seem to have started on Twitter. This January and last August. Most this January, some last August, and they're all very enthusiastic about Henry Cuellar. They don't tweet about anything else. They don't appear to have any other activity. They have 2 or 3 followers, that's about it. And they really love the congressman and believe that he should remain in office.
All right, I'm gonna read you my favorite quote and then I'm gonna tell you what's actually happening here. One guy wrote in, "The support with Henry is honest." The support with Henry is honest. And let's note the word honest, which is wonderfully ironic. And then they continue, "He's a hardworking and prepared man." You know, people on Twitter are always coming out and saying, "That guy's prepared, I like him because he is prepared." Detail oriented. Lot of talk about details on Twitter. Anyway, then the same guy continues. "Henry is a great example. My vote is for he." Is your vote for he? Well, that is an interesting observation by a non-bot, real human being, I'm sure. So what's going on? So everybody's in the bots and trolls game now. And before it was seen as conspiratorial to say, oh, they're trolls and bots on Twitter. I'm always amused when people say that. And it's almost always the people who are using trolls and bots that say that, okay? So there's been trolls and bots for almost as long as Twitter's been around. Were there actually Russian troll farms? Yes, there's no question there was. Anyone saying there wasn't is probably part of those farms, but not necessarily. There's dupes out there, and they're like, oh, I saw a whole bunch of people agreeing that Putin is very sexy. My vote is for he. Okay, and so, but that's like just tip of the iceberg. There's a great variety of trolls and bots. There's the fake left wing, there's the right wing who invented trolling in the first place, right? Locally here in America, there's the alt-right who is just, who probably is the best in the business, honestly, in the trolls. And then now my favorite set of guys, and I've been tweeting about it for weeks, so I love that they intercepted this story, okay, is the corporate Democratic trolls and bots. They're the funniest because they're so obvious and they're so bad at it, right? The alt-right guys do certain patterns, right? And you could tell they got sent over from 4chan or 8chan or 18chan or whatever they were doing these days, right? And they all have similar talking points, and they'll hit. And if you ever want to see where all the trolls and bots meet, check out my Twitter feed, okay? Because I will get attacked by right wing, fake left wing, corporate Democratic trolls and bots all at the same time. And you will notice patterns over and over again because they are given talking points to attack people with, right? So the right wing will attack me on these two things. The corporate Democrats will attack me on two completely different things, but it'll always be the same. Like Bobby and Susie will both agree from the corporate Democratic wing that okay, in fact, I'll give you one, right? You lost your election is almost strictly corporate Democratic consultants, okay? They're like, we have done the research on Uyghur. He lost an election. We will now use that as a talking point. Why should we listen to you? You lost your election. And every one of them will say the same thing. And then you click on their account. Oh my God, this person was animated about primaries and joined just last month on Twitter. And sometimes I'll out them, and then their tweet and their accounts will disappear magically.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, and I would say that based on what you just described, we can now infer what Henry Cuellar's campaign thinks his big weaknesses are. He's very prepared. He has great proposals, lots of experience. They're very worried about that. They think that is how they can fight off Cisneros. Cisneros is presenting herself as someone who actually cares and is going to try to accomplish things. Henry Cuellar hasn't done a damn thing other than get mixed up in Eastern European financial crimes, apparently. And so they have to pretend that now he has proposals. And of course he's experienced. She's not experienced. She's a total newcomer. You shouldn't trust her. It's like the most obvious, predictable propaganda.
Yeah, and the other reason why the corporate Democrat bots are hilarious is because there are no such real people, okay? So there is actual right-wingers, and they love having fun doing trolling, right? There are actual fake left-wingers, and a lot of them don't even know they're fake. They're like, oh, the most progressive thing you can do is attack progressives nonstop, right? And God, the most important issue was a totally nonsensical vote that wouldn't have made any difference several years ago. We should keep pounding away at that. So there are some people that are real there. And so when you add in the bots and the trolls on top, it has a certain authenticity. You could tell after a while it's the same talking points, and you could tell the difference between the bots and real people, because real people talk in a certain way that is authentic, as opposed to the bots that have the same kind of lingo over and over again, okay? But the corporate Democrats, there are no such real people other than like Bob Cheska and Hal Sparks. It's like a couple of guys who are always like, the Democratic leadership knows what it's doing. You're supposed to lose on voting rights so you can win on voting rights 20 years from now. Oh, you progressives will never be satisfied, okay? So, but other than 2 or 3 guys who are, by the way, usually, not always, but usually also paid by the Democratic Party, right? But they do it on a bigger scale. With the bots, they are saying things that no human being would ever say. Like, what the Democrats have done is good enough.
Yeah.
Who would say that, right? Even if you're like a moderate Democrat, you'd be like, hey guys, it was tough. You got to cut them a break. Maybe if you had 4 more senators, they could pass something. So there are real people who say that from time to time. Yeah. But like nobody says like, attaboy Joe Biden, you've passed plenty.
I don't have any more needs.
Right.
Nobody.
Who needs stinking voting rights? They don't say that. They know that's a bridge too far, right? So, and it's not just for Cuellar, guys. I mean, the Intercept got Cuellar, it's good night, terrible. Irene. It's definitely bots. Okay, They don't say that. I'll say it.
It's the most obvious bots ever. Not even good bots.
Yeah, they're just hilariously. So in terms of Intercept's reporting, my vote is for he. But they're all over the place. You go on Twitter, and if you criticize Democratic leadership or Joe Biden or Nancy Pelosi, corporate Democratic trolls will show up, as they certainly do for me, because I'm a marked person on Twitter. Like, this guy's a pain in our ass. Make sure you go on his Twitter. I don't know. They must have a list, right? And so. In fact, we could do it live on the show. I could do a tweet against corporate Democrats, and their bots will come up. Okay, we'll do that maybe in a bonus episode for the members, because it'll be fun.
Yeah, I get it when I criticize Elon Musk. I don't know for sure that they're bots. I just really hope for their sake that they're bots.
No. By the way, there's some fascinating thing here. For both the right wing and the fake left, if you check their accounts of the bots, they all support Elon Musk and they all support some form of Bitcoin, okay? So there is a deep connection there. I don't know what's going on and who's paying for it, right? But that pattern is unmistakable.
Yeah. We should also just clarify to close this out, The Intercept did reach out to the Cuellar campaign and they did not respond to this. Obviously, they're not going to. I would love for Cisneros' campaign to respond. It hasn't happened. Oh, and if it's not clear, we like to admit our bias. Obviously, we like Jessica Cisneros. I've endorsed Jessica Cisneros. I think that she's a great example, and my vote is for she. So, if that hasn't been clear,
I'm going to make it even clearer. Okay, Jessica Cisneros for Congress.com. We'll put the link down below if you're watching later on YouTube or Facebook. Check the description box for links, including the link to the Intercept article, which is brilliant. And by the way, you could just Google Jessica Cisneros and you'll get to the right place. And she's fantastic. She's a just Democrat. She's a progressive. She's authentic. She doesn't take corporate PAC money. Cuellar, by the way, on top of being one of the most corporate and corrupt Democrats in Congress, also has the FBI investigation of, I mean, he's so corrupt, he did it illegally. Like, that's crazy, right? I mean,
like Dinesh D'Souza. Like, how do you get caught with this system?
I mean, you could do legalized bribery till the cows come home. Yeah. But he's like, oh, some Azerbaijani guy wants to funnel money to me? Sure, right? So that's what he's under FBI investigation for. And on top of that, he's anti-choice.
Yeah.
In Texas, where they have vigilantes hunting people who are having abortions, Cuellar is on the right-wing side of that. So get him the hell out of Congress. Yeah. That's not our bias, that's our perspective, and and he has earned that kind of scorn. And my vote is also for she.
Yes, exactly. Okay, let's get to this last story because it's an important one. The San Francisco Police Department has now made clear that they have used DNA from previously collected rape kits years later to convict the women who had given the DNA of crimes. Absolutely insane, and we're gonna give you the details. The DA said Monday that his office heard about the potentially privacy invading practice last week when a woman's DNA collected years ago when she received a rape exam and test as part of a domestic violence and sexual abuse case. It was used by police to identify her after she was arrested on suspicion of a recent property crime. Every level of this is absolutely disgusting. So in that statement by the DA, it says, rapes and sexual assault are violent, dehumanizing, and traumatic. I am disturbed that victims who have the courage to undergo an invasive examination to help identify their perpetrators are being treated like criminals rather than supported as crime victims. We should encourage survivors to come forward, not collect evidence to use against them in the future. This practice treats victims like evidence, not human beings. This is legally and ethically wrong, if that wasn't already clear. And by the way, they also admit that although there would be no reason this would be acceptable, you also would have no reason to believe when you go and do one of these rape examinations for one of these rape kits that this could potentially happen in the future. DA officials said they don't believe the practice of linking suspects to crimes using DNA collected from the creation of these kits is disclosed in a waiver that victims signed before an exam. The DA said even if it were mentioned somewhere in the fine print, is that an appropriate waiver to seek from a victim who's just come in and reported a sex assault? Absolutely not. And I think that that is absolutely true.
So guys, it turns out that there's a lot of jurisdictions doing this. And so this is a giant problem. So when I first heard of the story, I thought, no, wait, there must be something wrong here. They're using the DNA of the defendants, right? And maybe some purists have an issue with that, or it's a civil rights issue or civil liberties issue or something along those lines, a constitutional issue. No, they're using the DNA of the rape victims against those same victims.
It's insane.
It's unbelievable. And the police are doing this. And so they're saying, oh, you suffered a rape 13 years ago. Well, we got your DNA in the system and you committed, in this one particular example that they found, a property crime. So now we're gonna imprison you. Well, first of all, the injustice is unbearable. And obviously the second point is, well, then people are gonna be reluctant to report crimes, and certainly this crime, because they're gonna take your DNA and they might use it against you later. Yeah. That's insane. So we're doing the most obvious petition in the world. So tyt.com/petition/DNA. But anytime we're doing a petition, you just go to tyt.com/petitions. So we just put it up, as you can tell. And we're asking both San Francisco Police Department, but also all local and federal jurisdictions to stop using the DNA of rape victims against them. So now look, we want these petitions to be interactive. Everybody does petitions, and we have too in the past, but we made them as interactive as possible to get effect. And several of our petitions have worked. Like when we asked Bernie Sanders to have a vote on $15 minimum wage, you guys got involved, you sent in videos, and he saw it and it worked, right? So in this case, this has gotta be a layup. I mean, this is an absolute outrage. So I want you guys to participate so we can go and take it to San Francisco Police Department and go, hey, 5,000, 10,000, however many people signed the petition and they're outraged by this. Okay, but then on top of that, I want you to be in the comment section and I want you to read the updates, and we'll have updates for you as we follow this. Because in an ideal world, you go find out if New Mexico is doing it if you live in New Mexico, if Minneapolis is doing it if you live in Minneapolis, or the federal government.
LA.
Just ask your local authorities, are you guys doing this, right? And you're gonna be shocked to find out probably that they're gonna say we don't know in the beginning, and then we're gonna try to stay on top of it with you guys so we can get action on this and end this atrocity that's happening not just in San Francisco, but unfortunately across the country.
Yeah, it's just sick. Like the police departments finally show an interest in this huge backlog of rape kits for this.
Yeah,
not to solve the crimes.
No, John, that's such a great point because we've covered this on the show before. They have an unbelievable backlog of rape kits. They take that rape and then they're like, we're not even gonna bother looking up the evidence to find the guy who did it. And sometimes the backlog's like a decade old. That's another travesty, right? Now they finally get to the rape kits and they're like, okay, let's go after the victims.
It's insane.
Nah, it's unbearable, unbearable. Let's go act together. Let's go act together and let's try to fix this together, okay?
Great.
And then the rest of the media will yell at us later for being activists. Okay, so we're out of time here. Everybody check out Damage Report. Fantastic show. You can get it on.
We have our days.
You can get it on all the platforms. We're on with just about all the platforms. Just type in Damage Report, you'll get it. And then next hour, David Schuster from Rebel Headquarters is going to join me. And we still haven't gotten to the witches story. Now right-wingers are doing literal witch hunts, okay? Literal, it's insane. And then the John Durham story as well. Oh, the right wings finally got him. Trump was infiltrated. Nonsense, almost every part of it's a lie. We'll debunk it. Stay right here, we'll be right back.
Thanks for listening to the full episode of The Young Turks. Support our work, listen ad-free, access members-only bonus content, and more by subscribing to Apple Podcasts at apple.co/TYT. I'm your host, Cenk Uygur, and I'll see you soon.